Hi guys, welcome to the broadcast. So the way this works is I'm on a bit of a delay, but you should be able to ask questions below the video in the G Plus suite where you're watching the video, and that's the link I gave you. And I can see two of you are here already. So if you just fire away with any questions, I'll be able to see them that way. Okay, let me just check some of these features to see if they're working here. Ask audience. Questions. But if anybody can kind of verify by just shooting in a comment below the video, that would be great, where I just said, hi guys. I guess for the time being, I'll just kind of talk freeform about today's topic, which is some of the score concerns and timing concerns that people have at this stage in their LSAT prep. And, you know, if also mention it if you don't really like this way of doing it. If you want to go back to the Adobe Connect in, please say so, you know, because that's definitely up for vote. I think so far the Adobe Connect in was the best way to do these webinars that we've tried, so we might as well stick with that. It did have some connectivity issues with dropping the connection that were bothersome, but it seemed to deliver the goods for the most part. Okay, so last month concerns. Obviously, this tends to be a really stressful time for a lot of people. You know, but I think that it really need not be. One of the important things to realize is that you're just a person, right? You're only capable of doing so much. So as long as you just arrange your schedule so that you do the most you can, and then you follow through on it, that's the most you could have asked of yourself. You know, you're a finite being. You can't suffer like infinite hands at the infinite torture at the hands of the LSAT, right? I know that's kind of a scholastic argument, but yeah, you're a finite being. You can't suffer infinitely here. So just remember that all you can really do is make a schedule for yourself and stick to it, and you're going to see progress. And I talk about this all the time because people get really concerned about their scores around this time. They get really concerned that they're not meeting expectations, that they're not improving fast enough. And what I'm going to say is that it's highly likely that rather than this being a time where you don't improve and you flounder, this should be when you probably start to see the most improvement. Because, you know, all the work that we put in, you know, building skills and trying to convert those skills into habit should start to pay off as you really now polish those habits and make them very automatic, you know? Make it so that some of the processes that used to be conscious, slow, and, you know, perhaps kind of, you know, full of defects, some of those processes will now become unconscious, really fast, and automatic. You know, you'll start to see answers where you did not before, see inferences where you did not before. One thing I'll say about that is you're going to get more and more of that kind of great progress the more you're keeping your head down over these prep tests and doing them. I know a lot of you are working off the schedules that we provide, and those are really intensive in this last month, giving you a ton of practice. You know, and there's so many reasons for that that I can't begin to list them all. So many different ways that you build intuition, confidence, etc. by doing lots of prep tests over and over again. So don't skimp on that. You know, this isn't the time to, you know, be looking for shortcuts, or it's also not the time to be freaking out and trying to retool things in a big way, trying to just like, you know, throw out your strategy and start over. now's the time to just keep practicing and getting better with the techniques that you have. You know, if you want to be going back and doing anything that's sort of backwards looking, looking at weaknesses and addressing weaknesses on review days or in the evening after you've done the rest of your prep, that's very productive, right? So right now, you should have a lot of material for any logs, for any error logs that you've got going, right? And by the way, if you're not doing that, definitely log errors, log the type of questions that are giving you difficulty, and that way you know what to address when you're looking at weaknesses, right? So once you start filling in these gaps and start addressing these weaknesses and plugging that up, pretty soon you run out of weaknesses, and hopefully that's right around the time that you're starting to right around the time that you're about to take the test, right? So, so generally this process in the last few weeks is just one of putting your head down and sticking to the schedule that you've laid out for yourself. And hopefully progress will happen very naturally. Now, I wanted to talk about what happens if for whatever reason you don't feel you're progressing during this time. And, you know, I think it helps take the pressure off to realize that, well, the LSAT may be like this big all-important thing, something that it's very difficult to overstate the importance of. This administration of the LSAT is not all-important, right? Hold on, I'm just now seeing that I've got some questions coming through. So that schedule, I just got a question from Brent that's saying, what about this 30-day schedule? Like, I've never seen this before. The reason we don't really publicize that a whole lot is I don't think it's an ideal schedule, and neither does he really. We think it's something that's going to work for a very limited number of people who have like hyper focus basically and can like stay focused on things. Like you guys don't know Josh the way I do. That guy works like 70 hours a week and doesn't blink an eye. I think most people, if they tried to do this crazy last 1 month schedule, which by the way, that wasn't the only month he was studying. He just really picked it up in the last month. But I think if most people tried to do this crazy schedule, it would be counterproductive. You know, so I've talked with him about whether we should even have that on the site. But we think it's maybe good for people who aren't good at planning and just, you know, are trying to do anything and everything to claw their way up to a halfway decent score by studying in 1 month. So, yeah, you know, that schedule, feel free to, you know, intensify your regime if you feel that you've got focus, reserves of focus in the tank, you know. Feel free to intensify that schedule that you're already working off of and dig in old drills, throw in games that you haven't done for a while, throw in other stuff. But generally, I think if most people do LSAT prep for 8 hours a day, they're going to run out of focus and actually get into lazy mental habits where they're not really thinking very well when they're doing prep tests and when they're doing problems, and they'll start seeing their accuracy actually fall. So, okay, hold on, what does this do? Okay, so that's the question I'm currently answering there. I'm trying to get a handle on some of these features. It's asking if that's an ideal schedule. Okay, so I think this way I can continually ask questions with this button. Okay, so where was I? I guess I was talking generally about how, although this one LSAT is not important, you know, what really ultimately matters is one thing, which is that at some point in time you show up to this test and put in an effort that is close to what you think your maximum potential is. If it doesn't happen on this administration, that's not going to be the end of the world. So take a little pressure off yourself. You know, does that mean that you should pull off the gas? You know, no, it doesn't mean that. But what you should do is, you know, not put pressure on yourself thinking that this is a do or die enterprise, right? Because these days, you know, if you cancel, that's certainly not going to hurt your record. If you get a bad score and then have to retake it, that's really not going to prejudice you at all in the applications process. So there isn't a whole ton of pressure of the sort of this being do or die. The pressure should come from within and you wanting to do well, right? So if you do decide to take this exam, if you're not, you know, delaying to December, if you do decide to take it in September, put pressure on yourself to do well because you want to do well and because you know you can, you know? And that's where the pressure should be coming from, not thinking too much about even what this test means, you know? Just view it as a test that you personally want to beat. Okay, does anyone have another question about, okay, it looks like we've got another question from Tenzing. Okay, I plan to take this. Here, I put the question up that I'm answering. I plan to take a test this Saturday and Tuesday morning. Based on those results, I'll be making my decision whether to postpone. Okay, the one thing that I would say, Tenzing, about that is, you know, there's still time left, right? If you don't hit exactly your score on these two tests, you know, averaging them together or whatnot, you know, say you're like only 3 or 4 points off. Well, maybe not 3 or 4 because I know where you are and you're pretty high already. So, but say you're 1 to 2, maybe even 3 points below. You know, to me, I wouldn't even think about putting it off until December because you're in, you know, you're right within striking distance. And you know, these next 3 weeks, if we just really focus on, you know, on getting you in the right mind state and you know, being at the peak of your powers, I think it's totally possible to hit that score range. You know, so just make sure you talk to me about your performance on those two tests, and you know, I'll help you make that decision about whether you might want to put it off or not. Okay. Yeah, so my thinking is that if you stay in this kind of range, you know, then you should definitely go for it. Okay. Okay, so I just resubmitted the thing to ask for questions. So if anyone wants to fire away with some more, I have to imagine we're on some kind of a delay here with that. I guess I'll talk generally about timing. And by the way, most of what I'm covering in today's office hours, I already covered in pretty great detail in these 2 webinars that I added today and yesterday to the requested lessons section in courseware. So definitely go give those a listen. They're both about 7 minutes each, and give you like a really good idea of what I think the best strategy is for your last month of prep and addressing timing and all that. And one thing I didn't address in those videos is how important it is to sort of take good care of yourself. You know, we talked about this in the very first webinars we did, but you know, if you're used to going out on Friday or Saturday nights and having a bunch of beers, definitely put that off, right? We don't want you doing that. We don't want you, you know, treating yourself badly during this next part of the exam process, right? And if you're not exercising yet, definitely go and get some exercising. You know, I have to imagine that not too many people have taken me up on my suggestion to try meditation, but especially if you're feeling some anxiety, definitely give that stuff a try. You know, and also, you know, ask questions. The forums have been pretty active, but, you know, I can definitely take a lot more questions. So, like, if you have any specific issue or you want to request some sort of lesson on a weak point, please do so. All right. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of things to talk about, except the big one is timing, right? And I see that Alex is watching, and Alex, I want to make sure to let you know that I'm coming out with an RC timing lesson tomorrow that will talk about RC timing more specifically. So definitely look out for that tomorrow. But some general timing stuff. And I talk about this in those webinars that I released today and yesterday that are in the requested lessons area of courseware. But the classic debate sort of is whether you want to shave down your time gradually, which is kind of what I suggested might work for some of you, or whether you want to keep practicing at 35 minutes and try and build your speed and accuracy staying within that 35-minute range. And the suggestion that I made was that if you try at 35 and you lose a ton of accuracy, you know, from say 40 minutes, then definitely try and shave down gradually. Whereas if you take a test at, like, say 35 minutes at a section and then take one at 40 minutes a section, and you don't notice a real difference in accuracy, I think in that case you might as well practice at the 35 minutes and try and build speed and accuracy from there. So there's those two different strategies that can both work, and you can even do a mixed approach. You know, some days try 35 minutes, some days give yourself a little more time. But one guideline is generally for the last 2 weeks before the exam, I think you should be doing anything you do at 35 minutes per section. And if that leads to a major decrease in accuracy, then it would be time to start thinking about maybe attempting fewer questions. I don't think anyone that I'm talking to right now is having that issue. I think you guys are all ones that I can expect will be able to finish the section with a reasonable degree of accuracy. But, you know, certainly let me know. You can use the anonymous posting feature in the forums if you're having trouble deciding whether to try to get to every question in a given section or a given section type, or you know, whether maybe you should knock some off. You know, if people are having trouble finishing the LR section, the first thing I always say is consider skipping and just marking guess answers on the parallel reasoning questions. Since there's generally 2 of them, you can free up, you know, 5+ minutes right there that you can focus on questions that take less time as a general rule. In games, you know, you can take a policy of maybe just skipping the questions that look like they're clearly going to require trial and error to do. So, for example, the last 1 or 2 games, the last 1 or 2 questions of every game tends to have one of these questions that there's no better strategy than simply trial and error. That's going to be very time-consuming. So possibly marking a guess answer there can free up a lot of time for other questions. And then more generally, the 2 timing problems that I see the most that I want you to be cognizant of the two timing problems that I see most is people over investing time in really difficult questions when they should be moving on. And then the next thing I see, and this is particularly true on RC questions, is people spending too much time on easy questions. So you need to continually experiment to make sure that you're not over-investing time in difficult questions or also in easy questions. Particularly on RC, give it a try. Give it a try where you don't maybe reread and recheck the passage quite as much when answering some of the easier questions that come right after the passage, and see if you retain the same level of accuracy doing that. Well, then you know that you were spending too much time on those questions. I remember that was something that I shaved major time off of RC, realizing that I was trying to verify questions that I really already knew the answer to very confidently. And I was going back into the passage and spending a lot of unnecessary time on verification. And it turned out that my accuracy stayed the same if I didn't do quite so much verification. So be aware, you've got to experiment and play around to find what works best for you. Likewise on difficult questions. You might apply my strategy of skipping some very hard ones and then suddenly find that you're skipping too many questions. If that happens, try and develop a better sense of which questions are really going to give you a hard time and which in fact were answerable, and land somewhere in the middle, between what you used to be doing, spending too much time on hard questions, and then spending not enough time. So continually experiment, and in doing so, you'll land on what the best approach for you is. Okay, it looks like I don't have any more questions. But let me just emphasize that I did cover these topics again in that requested lessons section of the webinar. So make sure you watch those videos if you want to get a little more last month of prep advice. And other than that, if there's no questions, I'm going to wait a minute and see if any questions come up. And we'll wrap it up tonight. Okay, so it looks like we've got no additional questions. So I'm going to sign out, and hit me up on the forum if there's anything you wanted to talk about that we missed. Okay, have a good night, guys. And I'll post the recording of this in the office hours area as well. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.